You've got to get up pretty early in the morning to speak to America's hardworking farmers and food producers. We should know. FLM Harvest is a strategic, full-service creative consultancy proud to reach more farmers, farmer boards, and food and commodity associations than any agency in the country. And we understand omni-channel as well as we understand the journey from field to fork. Most importantly, we connect clients to the audiences that matter to them.
Thank you for joining us for our Agri-Pulse Washington Week in Review. I'm Spencer Chase, joined as always by Agri-Pulse Senior Editor Phil Brasher, discussing the week that was, agriculturally speaking, in Washington, D.C. And in Washington, D.C. this week, the news that we're going to talk about is not so much about what did happen as much as what didn't. There was a disaster bill working its way through the Congress, through kind of the back channels that legislation does, for a few weeks now. And evidently, or eventually, Congress went home for a 2-week recess here at the end of this week, Phil, without that disaster bill passed to give disaster assistance to producers across the country, recovering from hurricanes, wildfires, and floods.
Right. It's still pretty much stuck on the same old issues. If anything, they've gotten a little bigger in terms of the differences between Democrats and Republicans and the White House in particular. The main issue is Puerto Rico and how much money to spend there. In terms of recovery, and it's just left producers, particularly in the Southeast and in California, those other areas hit in 2018 by the hurricanes and the wildfires. They're really just still hanging out there, months, and the months are continue to tick by. We'll see. Congress is now gone for till the end of April, and so it's obviously going to be May at the earliest, and before we get any kind of resolution to this.
Mm-hmm. And so obviously, as you mentioned, this is an issue that's not going to go away. It's, the hurricane disaster assistance that we're talking about is a 2018 issue. Also a number of flooding concerns in 2019 that are popping up now, as well as an additional bomb cyclone that's falling on some of the same areas that were hit by the last one. And who knows what additional damage that might cause. And the stored grain issue still remains. There's a lot of things in this disaster conversation that are still going to be waiting for these same lawmakers when they get back to Washington.
Yeah, in terms of the flooding in the Midwest, a couple of the biggest issues right now are whether you're going to get compensation for producers whose grain was destroyed, was flooded, was on storage and flooded. There's a House Democratic bill dropped this earlier this week that would take care of those producers. There's work on a similar provision in the Senate, but still, of course, no bill. Another issue is the Agriculture Department is going to need more money for something that's called the Emergency Conservation Program, which is very important in instances like this where you've got to do farmers and have got to do a lot of work in terms of restoring fields from all the damage and erosion that was done by the flooding. USDA needs some more money. They will almost certainly get it when a bill eventually passes.
Right. And at this point, bill has not passed. We'll keep you up to date on how that's looking. But as we mentioned, Congress going on recess now for another 2 weeks. So attention is going to shift elsewhere within foreign policy, in particular things like the Waters of the U.S. comment rule arriving on Monday. A lot of this administrative action is going to take a little bit more of a center stage here in these next couple of weeks. And in that administrative front, some new help for the Trump administration in the form of a Senate-confirmed official arrived here on Thursday. David Bernhardt, officially confirmed to be the new Secretary of the Interior. He had been serving in an acting capacity since December when former Secretary Ryan Zinke opted to resign. Phil, a reasonable, a small level of bipartisanship in his vote, but he was able to overcome some of the concerns that there were over his nomination.
Yeah, it's nobody's questioning his experience. He's served any number of positions at the Interior Department. Was there throughout the George W. Bush administration, had been Deputy Secretary, was confirmed to that in 2017, and then stepped in as Acting Secretary. Now he will be Secretary. For our viewers well know, the Interior touches a lot of areas. If you deal with the public lands, if you have an issue related to the endangered, might be an endangered or threatened species, The department has, or you're getting water from irrigation from water from a Bureau of Reclamation project, you deal with the Interior Department.
So they'll be dealing with David Bernhardt now as he takes full helm of the agency. And before we let you go, I want to wrap up with something that happened today. We're recording this on a Thursday, and something the ag sector has been watching for quite a while, especially the ag econ nerds among us that happen to be loyal viewers of this program. That being the 2017 ag census data. The Department of Agriculture press publish on that button here this afternoon, just releasing a treasure trove of figures and information for folks to sift through about where the ag economy sits. We could say at this point it's technically 2017 data, but it's the most up-to-date and most comprehensive data that we have on the subject. So all kinds of stuff to sift through. Just kind of one highlight in particular is that the average age of the American farmer, we hear that concern about folks keep getting older. The USDA data supports that inference. Getting up past the age of 57 on an average nationwide.
57 and a half, up over a year in that 5-year period between 2012 and 2017. The other number that really jumped out at me, it's just stunning when you think about it. There are only 100, as of 2017, there were only 105,000 farms that accounted for 75% of all the sales, all the agricultural sales that year. That's just remarkable, and just shows this. I mean, it really shows that this trend of consolidation has just continues, and it continued during that period.
And those of you that were at the Agri-Pulse Ag and Food Policy Summit will remember some research being presented by the folks at Aimpoint about what they see the future of the agriculture industry in 2040. This census kind of lines up with what they were saying. So if you have the chance, go ahead and take a view of that video on our website just to get an idea of what they're envisioning, and then juxtapose that to what USDA said today. A lot of similarities there, quite a bit of similarities. And as we mentioned, Congress is about to go on a 2-week recess. Some familiar issues will await them when they return. Still need to go through the disaster bill, and Phil, they're really going to have to start hitting the appropriations process hard when they return.
They really are. This fiscal 2020, the next fiscal year, starts on October 1st, which really isn't that far away. And this Congress has really gotten nowhere. They've got to start out with, they've got to reach an agreement, and their talks supposed to be starting with President Trump to get some kind of agreement on spending limits so they can start writing those spending bills for the next fiscal year. And if they don't reach an agreement, surely we won't have another shutdown, Spencer. But
we couldn't possibly have another shutdown. just be completely unthinkable. But that's something that we'll be watching for. We won't have to watch for that for a few months, but we'll keep an eye out for it. And obviously, as the appropriations process continues to unfold, we'll keep you up to date on all of the things that relate to that process as they relate to foreign policy and the concerns that all of you have about the agricultural industry. But I think that's going to do it for this week and for a couple of weeks here. It'll be a hot second before you see us all again. But be sure to stay tuned to agripulse.com. We're going to stay on top of all things agriculture during this 2-week congressional recess. But I think that's going to do it for this week. So for Phil Brasher, I'm Spencer Chase. Have a good one.